Hello everybody and welcome. This is History Dude, and today we will be exploring some Asian traditions in military history. And here is a brief timeline of the most important things to happen in the timeline between 2600 to 100 BCE. In 1000 BCE, the legendary Mahabharata War between the Kauravas and Pandavas is the first conflict described in Indian history. Very first one. In 261 BCE, the Mauryan forces kill around 100,000 Kalingan soldiers in a bloody battle during the conquest of Kalinga, which occurred in modern-day Orissa, India. Now, the victorious Mauryan ruler Ashoka renounced war and turned to the non-violent creed of Buddhism because of the horror that he saw in this conflict. In 221 BCE, after a long series of wars, the Qin kingdom under Qin Shi Huang conquers the least of the other warring states, making China a unified country ruled by an emperor for the first time. In 202 BCE, at the Battle of Gaijia, the Chinese Han army under Liu Bang, sorry if I'm really fucking up these pronunciations, a Westerner, Liu Bang traps the rival Chu force under Xiongnu in a canyon, killing most of them. Soon after, Chu surrenders and Liu Bang becomes the first Han emperor. And in 127 BCE, General Wei Qing invades the Xiongnu lands north of the Chinese frontier, beginning a Han-Xiongnu war that carries on intermittently until 89 CE. And the first dynasty that we are going to talk about in Chinese history is the Shang Dynasty. And now, the first dynasty in China was the Shang. Now, it ruled around the Yellow River Valley from 1600 to 1050 BCE. The Shang was succeeded by the Zhou, which introduced the use of iron weapons. Now, as you can see here, there are some bronze weapons, but the Zhou introduced iron, which was a much more hardy metal, as you saw from my Mesopotamian video. Now, the Zhou army supported a substantial standing army that campaigned against the, quote, barbarians around the borders of the realm. Now, the Zhou dynasty lasted until 256 BCE, but in reality, central authority disintegrated in the course of the 8th century BCE, initiating a long and complex period of wars between competing Chinese states. This is known as the Spring and Autumn period. Now, beginning around 770 BCE, it was the long prelude to the Warring States period, the start date of which historians conventionally give as 475 BCE. Now, you have to understand, during this time, the Shang Dynasty was producing bronze dagger-axes, arrowheads, helmets, shields, and early chronicles record battles against an enemy from the north called the, quote, Tufang, with forces that numbered up to 5,000 men. Army sizes increased under the succeeding Western Zhou dynasty, but it was not until the period of political fragmentation, as we just talked about, known as the Spring and Autumn period, that more organized military activity began. And here is a map of the Spring and Autumn period. And the Spring and Autumn armies combined chariots ridden by noble warriors armed with bows with infantry who fought with lances. Now, this era gave way to the Warring States period, a time of incessant warfare between rival powers such as the Zhao, Qi, and Qin, as armies of up to 100,000 men fought in the battles between rulers. A shift occurred in favor of infantry-based armies, while traditional weapons such as the lance, known as the Mao, and the dagger-axe, known as the Ji, became longer, making them more effective when used by a large number of troops. And here you can see some chariots ridden by nobles with bows, and the Spring and Autumn period infantrymen. This is what they would have looked like in ancient China. And here are the lances, the Mao, and the dagger axes, the Ji. And here you can see a soldier holding a dagger-axe, just to get an idea of what they look like. And here is the map of the Warring States period of China. Now, the crossbow appeared around this time, adding range to the army's destructive power, while the military organization also became more sophisticated with the publication of the first work on military strategy by Sun Tzu in around 500 BCE. Now, this is known as the Art of War. One of the most famous books of all time. Highly recommend you read it. Intense knowledge. Intense. After China became united under the Qin in 221 BCE, its successor dynasty, the Han, was able to call on even greater military resources with a war tax and a pool of recruits of up to 1 million, enabling campaigns deep into Central Asia and as far afield as Vietnam in 111 BCE. Now here is an image of the Battle of the Red Cliffs, which occurred in 208 BCE. And Battle of the Red Cliffs was a battle between, let's see, well, I guess I didn't really prepare too much on, yeah. Well, what I do know about the Battle of the Red Cliffs is, according to ancient sources, the number of soldiers with Cao at Red Cliffs were 800,000, although historians estimate about 220,000 took part. Now, basically what happened over the Battle of the Red Cliffs is the warlords depended upon their control of the Yangtze River, and they were organized to fight on water, while Cao's forces were entirely land-based. But marching south to attack them with a large army, Cao captured the river fort of Jiangling, and with it enough boats to sail his troops down the Yangtze. And at a point variously known as Chibi, or the Red Cliffs, they encountered the warlords' forces commanded by the general Zhu Yu. Now Cao's northern soldiers had traveled a vast distance into an alien environment. They were exhausted and disease raged in the ranks. Above all, they were inexperienced in fighting on water. Cao lashed his boats together to make a stable platform for his soldiers, and Zhu Yu prepared fire ships and sent them to drift down to destroy Cao's fleet that had become immobilized. The resulting conflagration was enough to persuade Cao to lead his weary forces back north by land, a withdrawal that under constant harassment turned into a rout. And that gives you an idea of the circumstances of what happened at the Battle of the Red Cliffs. Now, Mohenjo-Daro. The earliest archaeological indications of warfare in India come from the Indus Valley Civilization, where arrowheads and flat axes were found in the ruined city of Mohenjo-Daro, as you can see here. This dates toward the end of the 3rd millennium BCE, and the India depicted in the Vedic poems around 1500 to 1000 BCE had a similar aristocratic tradition to that of China, in which chariot-mounted nobles armed with bows were the most important military force. And by the time of the era described in the epic poems, such as this one, the Mahabharata, around 900 BCE, warfare had become more varied, with larger numbers of infantry and the first appearance of swords. As early states coalesced after 600 BCE, more realistic historical records begin to emerge, recounting, for example, the wars of Bimbisara and Ajatashatru of Magadha. That is a heck of a name. In their struggle against the Viriji Confederacy, they are said to have used large catapults to hurl rocks, as well as the Rathamusala, a chariot fitted with a mace that scythed through the enemy ranks. Now, from the early 5th century, the empire building Nanda Dynasty could employ armies consisting of 20,000 cavalry and 200,000 chariots, as well as 3,000 war elephants, which the Greeks encountered for the first time when Alexander the Great's army invaded India in 327 BCE. And here you can see an image of a war elephant. And here is an image of Alexander the Great's campaigns in India. As you can see, he reached the Indus River and such. But we're not talking about Alexander the Great. We're talking about the Indians and the Chinese. Now, from the 2nd century BCE, Indian dynasties lost territory in the north to the country to Central Asian nomadic groups such as the Yuezhi, and later the Sakas and Hunas. Horse-mounted bowmen, these warriors could travel rapidly, enabling them to carry out successful campaigns of harassment against Indian forces of greater number. The established Asian powers, with their more conventional military tactics, found these offensives difficult to repel. In China, the Han engaged in a long-running struggle against the nomadic Xiongnu people to the northwest. But first, here's a Saka horseman from the 7th to 3rd century BCE. And here are the Xiongnu. Now, the Xiongnu, several times during the 2nd century BCE, seized control of the strategic Tarim Basin, and they and many other tribes continued to plague the Chinese along the whole frontier of their empire well into the 5th century CE. And that stands for Common Era, for those of you who don't know what I've been talking about when I said CE. Which basically means modern times. It's the equivalent to AD. I just used BCE and CE to be more politically correct. And as you can see here, this is the Xiongnu Empire and the Han Empire. And the Xiongnu and the Han fought well into the 5th century. Now, Terracotta Warriors, my favorite. Now, first, let me give you some backdrop on the emperor behind the Terracotta Warriors. Now this emperor, Qin Shi Huang, sometimes known as Qin Shi Huang Di, unified all of China under his rule in 221 BCE, and he crushed his rivals by the relentless application of military power. As emperor, he centralized power, suppressed dissent, and launched large-scale construction projects, including the first attempt to build a Great Wall to block the incursions of steppe nomads. The Terracotta Army was created as part of the emperor's burial complex. It comprises over 8,000 soldiers, 150 cavalry horses, and 130 chariots, each pulled by 4 horses. The great majority of the army represented in these sculptures consists of peasant foot soldiers. They are depicted with armor of laced plates, as you can see here. The originals would have been made of bronze or hard leather, and though helmets are not shown on the figures, archaeological finds of armor include them. The figures were also equipped with real weapons, fragments of which remain. Other sources reveal that infantrymen were equipped with a variety of axes and swords made of bronze, and with staff weapons, most typically the dagger-ax, which we've seen before, the gay. This was a long spear with a sharp blade attached to the haft, which could be used to stab in a prodding motion or wielded like a scythe. Many of the men also carried crossbows, a fundamental weapon in Chinese warfare. Crossbows with sophisticated bronze trigger mechanisms were found during the excavation of the Terracotta Army. And cavalry was a recent innovation that had helped Qin Shi Huang Di achieve his military ascendancy. With no native tradition of horsemanship, the Chinese had learned the importance of mounted troops from their wars with steppe nomads. Some of the horsemen would have been armed with varieties of bows. The chariots represented a Western influence on Chinese armies. By this period, rather than being used as a shock force on the battlefield, they chiefly functioned as mobile command platforms for aristocrats and senior officers, kept to the rear of the fighting troops. Indeed, officers in the Terracotta Army are portrayed as taller than ordinary soldiers and are also identifiable by their long double tunics and more elaborate armor. And the arrangement of the Terracotta Army in ordered ranks suggests a body of disciplined soldiers drilled to march in step. According to ancient texts, armies numbering hundreds of thousands of men were fielded in the largest Chinese battles. Even allowing for exaggeration, the massed peasant forces must have been large and difficult to command. Banners were used to signal messages across the battlefield, drums marked in advance, and bells were sounded to order a retreat. Crossbows were probably deployed in mass formations with soldiers shooting volleys in sequence, one group loosing their bolts while another reloaded. An exchange of missiles at a distance was probably more to the taste of poorly motivated peasant conscripts than close-quarters combat. Now, the emphasis in ancient military writings on deception rather than pitched battles may well reflect the difficulty of executing decisive battlefield maneuvers with unwieldy forces. And you can see that in lots of the writings of Sun Tzu. He always talked about using deception and not fighting with your brunt force, but fighting with your mind. And lastly, I will leave you with this presentation of the timeline that I have set up, and I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. I really tried my best on it. I know they're not perfect, but hopefully they give you an idea of what occurred. That's basically all I'm trying to do. I'm trying to educate you guys in a fun way, that's exciting and not boring. So if there's anything that I'm doing wrong or you're totally bored, please tell me so that I can improve on it and make these videos better. I'm just trying to do the best I can. But alright, I hope you enjoyed, and as always, have an awesome day.